Here now to discuss, Curtis Ellis, America First Policy Senior Policy Advisor, former Trump campaign Senior Policy Advisor. Ford O'Connell, CivicForumPAC Chairman. Hadley, Heath Manning, Independent Women's Foreign Policy Director. And Kelly Jane Torrance, the Weekly Standard's Deputy Managing Editor. Ford, let me start with you. Promise made, promise kept. This is a big deal right before the deadline, and a lot of people didn't think it could be done.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Look, Trump's detractors on both sides of the aisle said it couldn't be done and he was crazy to try. What heartens me here is not only is this a promise kept, but it's also could be a template for future deals as we try to restructure with the EU and with China. And look, at the end of the day, this has always been about one thing for Americans, and that is jobs, higher standard of living, higher wages. And on this front, Donald Trump is done to put his best foot forward. The only question is whether or not Congress will get off their backside and make this happen.
You know, Curtis, you're the experts. You know the nuts and bolts of these things. Overall, it gives America greater access to Canada's dairy markets. Auto production starts at 63%, and in North America will go to 75%. We see where there's new implementations for financial services that wasn't covered at all. Obviously, e-commerce and digital commerce and technology wasn't covered at all in the NAFTA deal. The minimus, barriers that stopped even mom and pop from selling things on eBay into Canada without stiff tariffs. All of those things were addressed. The nuts and bolts, though, after saying all of this, the critics are saying, well, it's more like NAFTA 1.1. It's just the same deal with a different name. What would you say to them?
These are the people who never say anything nice about President Trump. Look, Chuck Schumer said
that's beside the point.
Chuck Schumer said the president deserves credit for this. It takes a lot to get that guy to say something nice about the president. This is a huge deal. This is a huge deal. A huge percentage, a large percentage of a car has to be made by high-wage earners. So that will bring some of these manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, these same experts who were poo-pooing this said, manufacturing will never come back to the United States. You need a magic wand to make that happen. President Trump has waved the magic wand. They said growth cannot be more than 2%. It's now approaching 4%, exceeding that.
Right.
So this is very big, very big.
Hadley, Heath, Manning, what are your thoughts on the deal?
Well, it's a big deal. It's a good deal. It's got a lot of winners. I think President Trump is among the winners for this deal politically. You said promise made, promise kept, and if only all of our politicians cared about keeping their promises the way the president does. I think he's walked a strong line here between updating and modernizing the NAFTA agreement. Canada and Mexico are some of our most critical allies and trade partners, so it's critical that we have, as free as possible trade between our nations that allows us all to be more prosperous.
Right.
And on the other hand, President Trump keeping good on his promise to try to bring more jobs back to the United States, especially in the auto sector.
Kelly Jane, some folks, of course, don't like President Trump's ham-fisted approach to foreign policy, trade policy, to all policies, right? I mean, he's pretty much in your face. But he did leverage America's economic might, and he pushed back against all of the experts, even those in his inner circle at times.
Yeah, you're right, Charles. And one of the big wins, I have to say, for President Trump in this is that Canada is let up on the supply management of its dairy industry. I mean, you remember Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, said we are not going to budge on this. And I have to say, as someone who's originally from Western Canada, I'm glad to see he budged, because you've got Quebec and Ontario have over 80% of that industry. And it's people all over Canada who are actually paying higher prices in dairy because the U.S. is not allowed to come in, because Canada is subsidizing it. So I think that was a huge win for Donald Trump when you had a president, or you had a prime minister literally saying, I'm not going to budge. Now, I have to say, I think that they actually were, besides that, though, they were a lot more alike than a lot of people are saying. I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau wanted those labor and environmental changes in there, and President Trump, as we heard before, was actually touting them. So we're going to see higher wages, more protection. That's something both men wanted. So there are wins, though.
There are elections, I think, today or tomorrow in Quebec, and and of course a lot of pundits have said that one of the big sticking blocks was because of the leverage that dairy farmers had in Quebec that was holding this back. So it's going to be interesting to see if Trudeau's punished or not in those elections. We'll see. But here's the question now, Ford. Can we or will we be able now to, sort of leverage all of this? Potentially EU deal, the Canada-Mexico deal, South Korea signed already, Japan in the process. Can we leverage all of these things and perhaps bring quicker some sort of a deal with China?
Absolutely. Look, the question here is going to be obviously getting this through Congress. But if we are able to get this through Congress,
Ford, why wouldn't Congress put this through?
I have no idea. But again, you
will.
understand that Donald Trump's name is on this. So somehow, somewhere, some Democrat will say, gee, NAFTA needed to be upgraded. But now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter because Donald Trump did it. Look, he did a great thing. This is truly historic. And yes, I do think that this can be a template forward. If Donald Trump has shown us nothing else, Charles, that is that you can act, tariffs do work, or the threat thereof. And as the world's biggest consumer, we should use that to our benefit while we still have it.
All right. President Trump did chime in on the China part because all eyes now to China in the final showdown. Let's take a listen to that.
We have $250 billion at 25% interest with China right now, and we could go $267 billion more. And China wants to talk very badly. And I said, frankly, it's too early to talk. Can't talk now because they're not ready, because they've been ripping us for so many years. It doesn't happen that quickly. And if politically people force it too quickly, you're not going to make the right deal for our workers and for our country. But China wants to talk, and we want to talk to them. And we want them to help us with North Korea.
So, Curtis, listen, we know China's economy has been stumbling.
That's right.
We had two manufacturing reports out of there today. Both were disappointing. But we had our own ISM number, which was robust. But more and more in these surveys, particularly when you have the producers, they're saying, hey, we're worried. We're starting to see it in our supply chain. We're starting to be concerned about supply, demand, also pricing. So are we prepared now to go all the way with China?
Absolutely. And China is very concerned about what just happened today, because we're going to see the supply chains, the manufacturing supply chains, move back to the Western Hemisphere, move back to North America. After NAFTA happened...
But we're told that that's really hard to do, that the supply chains are so entrenched that, that these arrangements are so entrenched that to undo them, it's not necessarily a Gordian knot, but certainly something akin to that. No,
that's exaggeration. Those are the same people who say prices are going to go up, you can't bring the manufacturing jobs back, you can't do this, you can't do that. I have great confidence in the ingenuity of American businessmen and these even large global corporations. Look, the toy industry moved from New York State down to Mexico after NAFTA, and then it moved to China after they entered the World Trade Organization. China knows it can lose all of those industries and those supply chains as quickly as they got them 20 years ago.
Hadley, how concerned should we be now that the focus is on China? And in your mind, is there a specific timeline?
And in my mind, no. I think there's so many things to consider. It's always better to get a deal right than to do it quickly. We saw the timeline on this USMCA deal come down to the wire, but ultimately I think what's left is a good deal. And Ford mentioned tariffs. The tariffs do work. They work to raise prices on consumers. They work to restrict free trade, but they work also, we've seen now, as a good negotiating tool. And at the end of the day, in the USMCA deal, the new deal signed today, there's going to be so many of the passenger vehicles produced on the North American continent that are prohibited from U.S. tariffs. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for U.S. consumers. So I'm happy to see a good deal at the end of the day. We should hope that all of our deals are good rather than fast.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all very much.